Start rolling here.
Okay. Well, thank you. Could you give your name, please?
Okay, Maliza Lang McMillan.
Where and when were you born?
I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, August 3rd, 1961.
Could you tell us the story about how you learned about the incident, the tragedy of Joe and Ada Lang?
My dad, Edward Lang Sr., asked me to look up the history about his dad, Emory Lang. And in doing so, he said that his grandparents were killed by night riders, and he wanted me to look up the history. So I went to the old courthouse, which at that time was located on Bay Street. And when I went there, I looked up some records which were on microfilm and microfiche, and I looked up the information which showed that Emory Lang's parents were killed by night riders. The story was that William and his brother, John Higginbotham, killed his dad, Joe Lang, and shot and killed his mother. The two Higginbotham brothers rode out to his property, set the barn on fire, and when Emery's father went out to put the barn out, to put the fire out, they shot and killed him. When his mother was looking out the window to see what was going on, they shot her, but she died a couple of days later in the hospital, which was Brewster Hospital at the time. I told my dad about the incident, what happened, and he told me to talk to my Aunt Gladys, which is really my great aunt, Gladys.
Did you ever find out what happened with the Higginbothams? Either a motive or what happened to what happened as a result to their family?
Yeah. When I talked to my great aunt Gladys, which is, which was Emery's sister, she told a story. She said back then that the Lang boys and the Higginbotham boys, they would have a wrestling match every weekend. And the story was that the Higginbotham boys told the Lang boys, well, we're going to have a wrestling match this weekend, but you better lose the wrestling match. Well, the Lang boys won the wrestling match. So that night, or either the next night, the night riders went out to the Lang's property and set the barn on fire. So when they set the barn on fire, that's when Joe Lang went out to put the barn fire out. And that's when he was shot and killed. And that's when William and John Higginbotham were stated that they were the ones who did the shooting.
Did you find out about what happened to any of the children of Joe and Ada Lang once they were shot?
Yes. In the house when the shooting occurred, Ada Lang, who was looking out the window and who was shot, the children were in the home. And when the shooting occurred, the children that were inside went under the house, had to go under the house and scattered. They went under the house into the fields that was behind the house. And when they went into the fields, they went to neighbor homes, they went to family members, they went to other homes. And what happened to them after that, I'm not sure. My aunt Gladys, which I say my aunt, but she's really my great aunt. She was my dad's aunt, Emery's sister. She said that family members raised and friends raised the rest of the children that scattered after that night, because both parents were killed.
So your grandfather Emery and his sister Gladys were two of those children who that night were running through the woods looking for a place, looking for refuge after their parents were killed.
Correct.
What sort of documentation did you find when you were researching this to tell you the story? Where did you get this information?
The information as far as the barn fire was from the microfilm. It was newspaper clippings.
Oh, okay.
As far as the story, as far as the wrestling match, that came from the storytelling from my great aunt Gladys.
So the newspaper didn't talk about the history behind the Lang and Higginbotham family.
No.
Were there any other aspects of Gladys's story that you'd like to share? Did she talk about her personal journey that night or in the years afterwards?
She didn't really talk about anything else. She shared that story, but she didn't talk about her family life or anything else. To tell you the truth, I'm not really sure who raised her after that. There's a lot of lost history on the Lang side. I don't know where the other children went, so that whole piece is lost. When the children, which is my grandfather's siblings, went into the fields, we don't know what happened to them. There's some hearsay as far as who, we have their names, but don't know where they went.
How would you describe the way that your great aunt Gladys, and your father Edward, when they hear about this story, or when you talk about this story, how would you describe the way that it's talked about, the way that they share their memories about their family with you?
It's a yearning to find out. You want to know. You want to know, who they are, where they are, their children, their grandchildren. It's a loss. My other side of the family, we know a lot about them. We share time with them. We share history, information with them. But with the Lang side, it's short-lived because we don't have a connection. We don't know where they are. We have no communication. So it's a yearning to make that connection. And I would love to make that connection.
Since you started doing this research based on your father's request, what has been the conversation with other members of the family since you've brought this story to their attention? Could you talk about some of their reactions?
I have a couple of first cousins who were interested and wanted to know, where the family members are, to connect with them, to find out more about the story, because this story went back to 1920 when Ada and Joe Lang, when this incident happened. And back then, Ada and Joe Lang, they owned 88 acres of land. And that was a lot of property for African Americans, people of color, to own that much property. They owned a pulp company. That I learned from my great aunt Gladys, that they owned a pulp company. With that, once they were killed, I found out through my research that the company that they owned, the property that they owned, It was lost because the taxes weren't paid on the property. So the Higginbothams paid the taxes on the property and acquired that property. So that history I like to find out. I like to know where is that property, just for information. I know I can't get the property, but just for history, just to know where our ancestors lived, where they own a company like that going back to 1920, because that is something of great value that you have persons of color to have such assets. That is something remarkable.
Have you heard anything about what happened to the Higginbotham family, if any of them are still around in Jacksonville?
I haven't heard. I've basically I haven't heard specifically, but I've heard like in the Dinsmore area, Hilliard, that the Higginbothams are well known and prominent, wealthy,
Financially prominent.
financially. Yes.
How do you, I think a lot of people knowing that maybe some, aside from emotionally, the material property that's gone, no longer part of your family legacy, do you have any sense of loss now that you've read about this history?
I do. I do. I have the loss of like I say, of family ties. Myself and my dad, we were, because my dad has expired, really connected with the family. My uncle James Douglas, he is really interested with family ties also. He's really interested to know what happened with the children, which will be his uncles and his aunts. Like to know where they are. And then those will be his nieces and nephews. Where are they? So it's just to have that connection, family ties, to carry on the legacy and the family name.
How would you say that not having a connection to that family affected your father? He obviously wanted you to research. How would you say, you as a grown woman, how would you say it affected him as a man?
I believe it affected him. To be short, say a lot, but because he was always the paternal figure of our family. He was the person that was the head of our family as far as his mother, his sister, his brothers, the nieces, the nephews. Everyone went to him. So of course he would want to know more about his father and his uncles and the rest of the family. Not knowing that information, I think, affected him to the point that he was able to stand firm and tall, but it was that a big piece that was missing that he wasn't able to share with the rest of the family. It was a piece that was missing that he wasn't able to carry on, with the Lang name, and which meant a lot to him. He was the type of person when you say gave up your name, you gave your word, that meant more than anything. So it meant a lot for him to not have that information.
And what does it mean to you searching for the histories of those children who were scattered that night?
It's it means a lot. It means a lot to more or less, I don't want to say closure, but it means a lot to bring it all together, to bring the family together, to keep the Lang name going on, to make it the connection, to when you have your family tree, to put the branches on there so you know how the tree branches out. And we need to know that. As time go on, we need to make sure we're not connecting, especially our children, are not connecting with their relatives. And I know there's different devices now, Ancestry and things like that we can take advantage of. But, you know, we need to sit down and talk and make that connection, you know, ourselves, face to face, you know. We need to do that.
Do you imagine one day this story coming out? I know the Higginbotham families, for instance, none of those people today had anything to do with what happened 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. Do you imagine at some point maybe a sort of a greater community or a family healing where people can acknowledge this story? And I might be sort of just pushing something that's even unimaginable right now, but...
Yeah, I always wonder if, you know, in the African American community and the black community, you know, we pass on stories and history. And I always wonder in the Caucasian community and the family, do they pass on the same history? And I just wonder, in the Higginbotham family, did they pass on that same history? You know, it may be somewhat negative, I would think, on the Higginbotham side, but did they pass on that history? And is the history the same as it is on the Lang side? Maybe a different story. On the Lang side, this is a story that was told to us. It may be different on the Higginbotham side. Something I just learned today in reading the newspaper clipping that said that there was some warrants out for the Lang family, and that the Higginbothams took some warrants to the sheriff the day before the killing of the Langs. Not sure what the warrants were for, and they said for the Lang family, the whole family, the entire family. That's odd, you know. So there's some more research I would like to do to find out what's that about. So as time go on and learn more, there's more to learn and more research, you know, to do.
If any of the members of the Higginbotham family reached out to you in a spirit of healing and an attempt to educate themselves about it, is that something that you might be open to, and other members of your family?
Yeah, for sure. Because it's all about education.
Right.
Yeah. Right. It's not about anger, you know, and it's all about education, all about history.
So in closing, I think it's important to remember when we talk about our ancestors, I think oftentimes we invoke them. I think they're listening. And as we both know, given the tragic history of what we're talking about, Joe and Ada's story wasn't talked about very much. You know, so I believe that they're paying attention. So I thought it would be fitting maybe if you could close by maybe a addressing Ada and just talking about what she would want to know about what happened to her family, right? What would you like to say to her if you could? And you can speak right to the camera.
I would like to say to my great-grandmother, which is odd because when you say great-grandmother, that's not so long ago. You should be proud of your offsprings. You should be proud of your grandchild, which was Edward Lang. You should be proud of your family. I hate what you went through. I hate what your husband went through. And I hate what your family and your children went through. But I think it's wonderful what you all acquired to have such prosperity as far as the number of children that you had, the love that it seems like you all have for your family, the love that the children have for you all, and what you acquired as far as monetary, the land. I mean, back in 1920, to have 88 acres of land, a company, a pulp company, and be African American people of color, I mean, that is unheard of. But you need to be proud. Be proud of your family. You have great-grandchildren, great-great and great-great-grandchildren who are making marks in this community. And I talk about you. Our family talk about you. And we talk about your husband. So your legacy and the lineage still goes on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.